I woke before the others because the cold doesn't wait for you. It drags you out of sleep like a hand at your throat. The canvas above me sagged under the weight of fresh snow, the seams creaking like they might tear apart any moment. The air inside the shelter was sharp enough to cut, and the children, wrapped in every scrap of cloth we had left, breathed little clouds into the dark. Somewhere outside, an ox bell rang once, and then silence. That silence told me more than any words could. Something was gone. Something had ended. If you want more true stories like this, stories that hold you inside them, don't forget to subscribe. The flap of the shelter lifted, and one of the men stepped in. His beard was thick with ice, his eyes raw and wet from the storm. He only said one word, blocked. Just that. The mountain pass was gone. Closed. The way forward buried in white. A single word, and it spread through us like poison in water. I looked around. Mothers stared at their sleeping children, some clutching them tighter, as though arms could keep out hunger. The fire had died to ash. We had no warmth left, not enough food, and now no way forward. The dream of California, that sunlit valley, that promised land of orchards and soft winters, it felt like a cruel joke we'd told ourselves too many times. The truth is, we shouldn't have been here at all. We left too late. That's how the chain of mistakes began. A month lost at the start, and every day after seemed like it was chasing us. But no one wanted to admit it. Reed had shown us that book with its neat little map. A straight line west. "We'll save 3 weeks," he said, and we believed him. How could we not? 3 weeks meant the best land, the chance to be first, to be rich. We wanted to believe. We had to. But that line on the page didn't tell the truth. It didn't tell us about the desert where the wagons sank like stones, or the forests where every mile had to be hacked out of trees with raw hands. It didn't tell us about the animals collapsing in their harnesses, tongues lolling, eyes rolling back while we whipped and begged and prayed. The mapmaker never wrote about the sound an ox makes when it dies standing, or the way your stomach twists when you realize you'll have to walk in its place. I can still see the faces. Children too tired to cry, lips cracked, dust turning their skin the color of ash. Women counting out the flour with eyes that never looked up. Men arguing, always arguing, about which way to go, which tree to cut, which risk to take. Pride and fear make a bitter stew, and we drank it every day. One night the cattle were simply gone. Vanished into the dark. Maybe stolen, maybe wandered. It didn't matter. Without them, everything became heavier. The wagons, the hunger, the silence. We left things behind. Chairs, trunks, tools. Even the piano someone had carried all this way. Abandoned in the dirt like a gravestone for our old lives. Every mile forward was a little more of the past lost forever. And then came the mountains. We thought October was safe. They told us winter wouldn't come until November, that the pass would be clear. But the mountain doesn't keep schedules. The snow came sudden, thick, alive. It swallowed the trail in hours. It closed the teeth of the Sierra Nevada on us like a trap. We tried to push through. Tied ropes around our waists, took one step, then another, sinking higher each time. Snow to the knees, to the waist, to the chest. Each drift heavier than the last, and the wind cutting like knives. We told ourselves just one more ridge, just one more climb, and California would spread before us like a promise finally kept. But the mountain didn't move. It never even noticed us. So we went back to camp, back to the half-built shelters and the wagons huddled together like bones in the snow. Someone stacked pine boughs into walls. Someone else inventoried the last of the flour. We whispered about rescue, about holding on, about spring. But each day, the snow deepened and the rations thinned. Each night, we listened to the wind bury us a little deeper. That's when the fear changed. It wasn't the fear of getting lost, or losing animals, or running late. It was the fear of each other. Hunger makes you count differently. You start counting mouths instead of miles. You wonder, though you never say it out loud, who will last and who won't. You hate yourself for thinking it, but you can't stop. And still we pretended. We told the children, not long now. We told ourselves the storms would pass. But I could feel it in my bones, in the way the mountain pressed down, silent and eternal. We were trapped. The Sierra had closed her arms around us, and she wasn't letting go. The days blurred into one another. I tried to keep track, scratching lines in the wood, but after a while the storms erased everything. Morning, night, they felt the same. The only way I knew time was passing was by the shrinking piles of food. The flour dust at the bottom of a sack. The strip of dried meat thin as paper. The sound of children chewing slowly, trying to trick their bodies into thinking it was enough. We started stretching meals with water, turning flour into paste. Then the paste thinned to nothing more than cloudy broth. After that came the hides, boiled until the water turned dark and bitter, until the leather was soft enough to chew. It didn't fill you. It just kept you alive enough to suffer one more day. Some nights, I thought the silence would drive me mad. The snow outside muffled everything, like we were buried alive already. And then suddenly someone would scream, a child's fevered cry, or the howl of a man dreaming about food. It always ended quickly, with someone hushing them, because none of us wanted to hear the sound of our own despair. I remember the arguments. They were sharp, fast, desperate. About who had eaten more, about who had stolen a little from the common pot, about who deserved to live and who didn't. I saw neighbors I had once trusted glare at each other, as if an ounce of flour was worth more than a friendship. Hunger rewrites your soul. It turns kindness into weakness and suspicion into instinct. And yet there were moments, brief, fragile moments, when humanity showed its face. A boy gave his mittens to a smaller child. A woman sang to keep the little ones from hearing the wind. A man offered to take a night watch for another whose wife was sick. These small mercies were like sparks in the dark, too small to warm us, but enough to remind us we hadn't lost ourselves completely. Not yet. Then came the decision. A rescue party. The strongest among us, the ones who could still stand upright, would try to cross the pass on foot. They would carry what little food we could spare, leave notes, mark trees, and fight their way through the snow to bring help. It sounded impossible, but impossible was all we had left. I remember that night before they left. None of us slept. The snow rattled on the canvas, and the fire shrank to embers. One by one, the volunteers prepared themselves. A boy, hardly more than 16, said he would go. A woman wrapped a scarf tight around her throat and kissed her children goodbye. An old soldier stood silent, staring at the mountains as if they were enemies he had fought before. No one asked how far it was. No one asked how long it would take. To ask was to admit the truth, that they might never come back. Dawn came like a bruise, slow and gray. We watched them step into the drifts, roped together, moving like shadows against the endless white. Every step looked like it might be their last. A child clung to his mother's skirts, begging her not to go, and she had to pry him off with hands that shook. Another man, always so quick with jokes, said nothing at all. They disappeared into the storm, swallowed whole. We waited, listening to the snow, waiting for voices that never returned. After they left, the camp grew quieter. Each day, without word, pressed heavier on us. The food was nearly gone. The hides were gone. We boiled bones until they dissolved into a bitter jelly. But hunger isn't patient. It gnaws and claws and whispers the unthinkable. And one night, when the snow fell harder than ever, the whispers became words. Someone said it out loud. What we all feared, what we all prayed we would never hear. That if the rescue didn't come, if the snow never ended, if the children kept crying, there was only one thing left. I remember the way the words hung in the air. No one breathed. No one dared to move. Then someone else nodded, slow, ashamed. Another whispered, God forgive us. We all looked at each other differently after that. Not as neighbors. Not even as friends. But as the only food left in a world that had run dry. That night I didn't sleep. I listened to the storm, to the canvas sagging under the weight of snow. And I prayed. Not for deliverance. Not even for survival. I prayed for the strength to face what we had become. The ones who left us, I still see their faces. We called them the forlorn hope. Brave souls, desperate souls, it doesn't matter which. They tied scraps of cloth around their feet, wrapped blankets around their shoulders, and carried as much as their arms could bear. And then they vanished into the storm. Days passed. Too many days. We told ourselves they had made it through, that help was on the way, that we would hear shouts echoing down the pass any hour now. But the truth seeped in like the cold, slowly, then all at once. They weren't coming back soon. Some of them might never come back at all. In camp, the snow rose higher, sealing us in. We tore apart wagons for firewood, every crack of splintering boards sounding like the breaking of our own bones. The smell of smoke mixed with the stench of sickness, coughs, fevers, people wasting away before our eyes. The children's cheeks grew hollow, their eyes too large for their faces. A mother would hush a crying baby, then cry herself when she thought no one was watching. We boiled hides again. We chewed on straps, belts, anything that once had life in it. Hunger became the only law. It stripped away manners, stripped away civility. A neighbor you once trusted with your child's life now looked at you with suspicion, as if you were hoarding something, as if you might be holding back just one more crumb. And then came the day the last barrier broke. It happened quietly at first. Someone whispered that a body could keep us alive. Not an enemy, not a stranger, one of our own, already dead, already gone. The words twisted in my stomach, made me sick. But I saw the eyes around the fire, the hollow cheeks, the way every head turned when a child coughed. The silence was worse than the suggestion, because silence meant agreement. The first time, I couldn't do it. I turned away, but others didn't. They cut what they needed, their hands shaking, their faces pale as the snow outside. They ate in silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound, until one by one, the rest followed. I tasted nothing. I only felt shame. It slid down my throat like ice and sat heavy in my gut, heavier than the hunger ever had. After that, nothing was the same. We avoided each other's eyes. We prayed harder, as if words could cleanse what we had done. We told ourselves it was survival, that God would understand, that the dead would forgive us. But when I lay awake at night, listening to the wind batter the canvas, I wondered if forgiveness was even possible. Somewhere beyond the mountains, I hoped the forlorn hope were still alive, that they had pushed through the storms, that they had not faced the same choice we had. But in my heart, I knew better. Out there, in the same blizzards, in the same hunger, they would be forced into the same corner. Hunger is a merciless master, and it doesn't care whose soul it devours. The children asked when spring would come. Soon, I told them. Always soon. I didn't believe it anymore. But what else could I say? That we were trapped, buried, forgotten by the world? That California was just a cruel dream, and the only thing ahead of us was snow, hunger, and death? So I lied. I told them stories of orchards and warm rivers, of golden fields and soft nights. I told them that if they closed their eyes, they could almost smell the blossoms. And as they drifted to sleep, thin and pale in the firelight, I wondered if they would ever see anything beyond these mountains. Every day I prayed to hear voices in the distance, the crunch of boots in the snow, the sound of salvation. But the only sound was the storm. Always the storm. The forlorn hope. That's what we called them, though the name came later, whispered like a prayer and a curse at the same time. They had gone into the white, carrying scraps of food, carrying our last chances with them. We waited. Days blurred. Nights pressed heavy. And then, one evening, a figure stumbled back into camp, half-dead, wild-eyed. Not the whole party. Just one. The story spilled out in fragments, cracked and broken like the ice on the river. They hadn't made it far before the snow crushed their hope. The drifts swallowed them, the cold gnawed their flesh. One by one they collapsed. The food ran out quickly, too quickly, and then came the choice, the same one we had already faced in our camp. Out there, in the middle of the wilderness, they faced it too, and when the choice was made, there was no going back. I listened as he spoke, and I felt my stomach twist. I had wanted to believe they were better than us, that they had found a way to survive without shame. But hunger is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter if you're strong or brave or pious. Hunger strips it all away until you are just an animal with shaking hands, doing what you swore you never would. He said some of them kept going, that a handful had pressed forward, dragging themselves over ridges, sinking into the snow, carrying nothing but desperation. They left bodies behind them like milestones. And maybe, just maybe, they had broken through. Maybe they had found help. He couldn't say. He didn't know. In the camp, those of us left alive listened in silence. No one spoke of it openly, but we all knew what it meant. If those few had reached the settlements, they might bring rescue. But how long would that take? Weeks? Months? And by then, who among us would still be here to save? The snow kept falling. We huddled in our shelters, our breath turning the air to frost, our eyes sunken into our skulls. Some gave up, lying down and closing their eyes, as if sleep could carry them somewhere better. Some still clung to scraps of hope, whispering prayers over empty bowls. And some of us, most of us, just kept breathing, because that was all there was left to do. The children grew silent. That was the worst part. In the beginning they had cried, begged for food, asked when the snow would end. But now their voices were small, fading. They no longer asked. They no longer had the strength. I would have given them anything, my life, my soul, but there was nothing left to give. One morning I looked out at the ridge, and for the first time in weeks I thought I saw movement. Black dots against the white, too steady to be deer, too heavy to be birds. At first I thought it was another trick of hunger, another cruel dream. But then the sound came, faint, muffled, but real. The crunch of boots in the snow. Voices. Human voices. I don't remember running, but I must have because suddenly I was outside, stumbling through the drifts, shouting words I barely recognized as my own. Others followed, falling, clawing, reaching. And then we saw them, men wrapped in furs, carrying supplies, their faces grim with what they found. Rescue. But it wasn't salvation. Not yet. They couldn't take us all. They brought what little food they had, promised to return, to make trips, to save as many as they could. But I saw it in their eyes. They didn't know if they were in time. Too many were already gone. Too many were too weak to rise. And as I stood there, tears freezing on my face, I realized the truth. We were not escaping the mountain. Not all of us. No matter how many rescuers came, no matter how hard they tried, some of us were already claimed. The mountain had taken its share. The rescuers had come, but they looked at us as though we were already ghosts. They gave us bread, small pieces at first. Too much would kill us, they said. My hands shook as I chewed, my stomach burning with both relief and pain. I could see the same fire in the eyes around me. We had survived long enough to taste food again. But survival is not the same as salvation. They couldn't take us all. There were too many of us, too few of them. The strongest left first, children pulled along in blankets, mothers stumbling beside them. The rest of us stayed behind, waiting for the next rescue, hoping the snow would ease, praying the rescuers would find their way back before death did. I watched my friends disappear over the ridge, their outlines swallowed by white. And I wondered if I would ever see them again, or if I envied them for leaving at all. The camp grew emptier, but not quieter. Those left behind lingered in a half-world between life and death. Some prayed constantly. Some muttered to themselves. Some simply stared at the snow, their minds gone. The smell of death was everywhere now, soaked into the wood, the canvas, the very air. When the rescuers returned, they found more bodies than they had left behind. And yes, they found the evidence. They knew what we had done. They didn't speak of it openly, but I saw it in their eyes, the way they looked at us, the way they looked at the bones. They would never say it out loud, not then, not there. But the truth had already marked us. We would carry it forever. The rescues came in waves. Each time, more of us left, staggering down the slopes into the hands of strangers, while others stayed behind, too weak to move. I prayed each time to be chosen, to be strong enough, to not be left. When my turn came, I barely had the strength to rise. They half-carried me, my feet dragging through the snow, the world spinning around me. But I knew if I fell, if I gave up, I would never rise again. The journey out was a blur. Hunger shadowed us still, and death followed close. Some died even after we were safe, their bodies too broken to recover. Children were carried in arms that once held rifles. Women stumbled forward with eyes that no longer cried. Men who had once spoken of land, of orchards, of gold, they walked in silence now, broken by the price of their dreams. When at last I stood on green earth again, when the snow was behind me and the air smelled of spring, I thought I should feel joy. But I didn't. I felt hollow. California was there, yes, the land of promise. But the cost was burned into me. Friends, family, neighbors, left behind in shallow graves, or not in graves at all. Their faces come to me still, in the dark, in my sleep. People ask how we survived. They want the story neat, simple. Courage, endurance, faith. They don't want the truth. The truth is that the mountain chose who lived and who died. The truth is that we did what we swore we never would. The truth is that survival is not the same as living. I carry the scars. Not on my skin, those heal. But in my soul, in my memories. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the wind through the pines, the canvas snapping under snow, the silence after a child stops crying. That silence will never leave me. And so, if you ever travel west, if you ever climb the Sierra when the sky is clear and the sun is warm, remember us. Remember the families who left in hope and found only hunger. Remember the mistakes, the pride, the warnings ignored. Remember that California was not free. It was bought with flesh and sorrow. Because the mountain never forgets. And neither do I.